afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Harding. I am the Director of Marketing and Communication for the National Cryptologic Museum Foundation, and I welcome you to our cybersecurity chat today. Our speaker will be Donald Costello, and the topic will be how coding protects messages from being compromised. Professor Costello is with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He's actually currently the chair of the Nebraska Hall of Computing. He is also has done research and consulting across many different organizations and associations, and has a lifetime of experience to share with you about how coding protects your messages. So, Professor Costello, it's all yours.
Well, hi, everybody. As you can see from the slide, you have the picture of what we're doing here. They asked me to tell you a little about myself, and I hope this doesn't bore you, because I'm an old man. I got a lot of experience. So I'm talking about a little bit about my background in security and computing. So I was born in the Bronx in long time ago, and I worked at Yankee Stadium, and I'm still a Yankee fan and loved watching the game last night. I also worked for the New York Times and wrote sports for them. And at that time, I wanted to get into a society known as the Newton Mathematical Society. So through a lot of help from people, I went to see a fellow by the name of Dr. John Bacchus, who worked for IBM in Poughkeepsie. And those of you who ever studied computing, there's something called the Bacchus now, or form of a language, and that he's the inventor of that. And during my life, I've met a lot of good, informed, and interesting and helpful people. What I saw as I traversed this field was that I could work in journalism and I could make a certain number of dollars a week and a year, but I could work in computing and I'd make a heck of a lot more. So I chose the way to get out of the Bronx was to work in computing, and the way I would do that would get a good education. You'll also find that when you work in any field in computing, and especially in this business of coding and that computer area, you got to learn how to be a team player, because you got to work with people who may not be as smart as you, or you may work with people who are smarter than you. And what you have to do is avoid arrogance. A lot of us learn in something in computing and we get a little arrogant. So let's talk about security, and we ask ourselves, what do we mean by security? And we have some feeling about security because we sort of have a feeling of what it means to be to keep your home secure. And what we're talking about is, what do we mean by security of your computer? And we also want to know what we mean by security of your phone. So we know, if only by watching the news, that people are breaking into other people's computers, and people are breaking into other people's phones. So these people who are, in a sense, attacking us, they may be companies and trying to get into your files. A lot of people try to break into the University of Nebraska's system. In fact, we have over 500,000 attempts a day of people trying to break into the University of Nebraska systems computing. And why do they want to do that? Well, sometimes they're just troublemakers and they want to cause trouble. Other times they want to get our research. What are we doing? How are we doing it? Sometimes they want to steal our courses. So as we recognize this, and we know that it's important to maintain security, we get some feeling about what that's about. Now we have to learn, well, what can we do to gain more security. So the question I'm asking is, what can happen if the security of your computer or phone is compromised? So compromised is the word that we're talking about, and compromised is just a word that developed in the field, and it means that somebody has broken in and gotten a hold of your data or your files or your software. They steal software too. So I asked, how many sites have you heard about that were compromised? Well, if you watch the news, the computing news, the news about this area, you'll find out that they happen all the time. And what happens when somebody breaks into a file? Well, they can get information about you. They can get, and very often are looking for, your Social Security number. So that's a very important number. If they get that, they can do a lot with your account. I had one gal that was in one of my security courses, that she had her identity stolen. It cost her $7,000 of legal fees fighting people, the charges that they built up on accounts that she had. So I've answered sort of what was lost because the site was compromised in the terms of the Social Security number. But they can also steal, as I say, files. They can steal software that you have. They can steal email that you write. And of course, I mentioned the Social Security number. So when the thief penetrates your site and gets that, they can fake it and say that they are you. So the question that we're really discussing after all this introduction is, how do we protect the message from being compromised? That's where we're going to. So the question is, what is a Caesar cipher? That's what we're going toward. And the question follows, who was Caesar? Well, you may have heard of, soon you've heard of Julius Caesar. So we're going to try a Caesar 3 code. Now what this means is that we're going to take the short message just as an example, and we're going to try to use a Caesar 3. Well, what do we mean by a Caesar 3? So that means that we take the letter A and we move it 3 letters up. So A goes to A, B, C, D. So A goes to D. And T, I believe, is 20. So the T goes to the number 20. And the other T goes to the number 20. And the A then goes to the number 1. And the C goes to, goes to B, C, D, just like it did in the first time. And the C goes to D, E, F, etc. So the question is, let's change the word attack by using the Caesar 3 code. So we call that, we encode. We change it, but the word is encode and the other side is decode. So I'm going to get into Excel here. If we put down what we're talking about, ATTACK, and then we put over here maybe C-3 to be short for that. And so when we take that, we'll break it up into the letters A-T, T, A, C, K. So A goes to 1, and T goes to I believe it's 20. Goes to 20.
Useless.
And T goes to 20. And A goes to 1. And C, I mean, this is not goes to, this is the code for A is 1, T is 20, A is 1, C is 3. C is 3, and K is, let's see, K is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J is 11, I believe. Okay, so now we're going to use, we said we're going to use 3. So then that 1 goes to 4, 20 goes to 24, 20 goes to 24, 1 goes to 4, 3 goes to 7, and 11 goes to 14. So now that tells us just a numerical version of it. Now we're shipping this this is the process of encoding took 2 steps. One was to do the new numerical value by adding 3 to each of the numeric numbers we're talking about. Now we have to say what letter it is. So the 4th letter is A, B, C, D. So this then becomes D. And 24 is 2, 3 back, so to 24, 25, 26 would be Z. So that's X, I believe, is 24. And X is 24. And 4 is G. And 7 is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And 14 is what? A, B, C. 10 is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N. So I might have done some of these wrong. You can check me. So that's the encoding of the word attack into DXXDGN. And that is what you then send to the person that you want to send that message to. And you're encoding it so that the enemy can't read it. At the time of Caesar, of course, they didn't have computers, so it was you could be relatively sure that your message wouldn't be caught. So one of the things we might do as we're thinking about this, as we were doing a lab, we might say, let's do Caesar 4, let's do Caesar 5. So that obviously isn't a very strong coding process. So now what do we do with the message? That's right, we send it to a warrior called Lee. So this is a person who's going to do the attacking. And what does Lee have to do with the encoded version? That's right, decode the encoded version. So when Lee gets that D, etc., then Lee has to decode that encoded version. So if you did, how we had the time, we would try to decode that message. So did you have any trouble? That's the question I ask. And don't forget, now this is a very simple coding scheme for our time. This break is broken in microseconds. So one of the things we're to learn in life is that nobody is good at everything. So some of you are good and some of you are not that good at doing this thing. So we might try partnering. I said one of the things I learned is I have to learn to work as a team. So if we had the ability to partner to solve a problem, then I'd say, let's pick a partner in your class and let member one encode retreat. So instead of attack, we encode the word retreat and send it to member two, the partner. Then member two would have to decode the encoded version of retreat and send back the message of yes or no, and send that back to member one using Caesar 4. Well, why did I change that? Well, I do anything I can to confuse someone that's trying to break into my code. And as I mentioned, this is a very simple code. And so there's things that you can do that make things more complicated, so, and therefore harder to break. So what you might do in your company, in your organization, instead of using every day Caesar 3, you might decide on the day of the month, you'd start with the first day of the month, you'd use Caesar 1, the second day Caesar 2, the 26th day Caesar 26, and so on. But then that might be too simple. So you might have another pattern that instead of going from 1 to 26, you do some agreed upon pattern. So all of this in the classical sense, when you're at the Caesar level or at, the year 1500 or something, you're trying to make it harder and harder for the person who doesn't have the computer strengths that we have today to break that system. So when we're doing this kind of work, we often want to see what other people are doing. So we look at NSA. So I'm going to try to get nsa.gov on my screen here now. So they have now, they're saying sign up now for the NSA's 2020 Code Breaker Challenge. So here, if you had done a lot of this and learned about code breaking, then they give you a challenge. And I'm not sure what your backgrounds are, but you might aim for something like this. You might say, well, I can't do it right now, but if I study more and more about this code breaking business, maybe I'll be ready to do that kind of thing. And you notice all these pull downs that they have us. You can find out this National Security Agency, they tell you a little about them. The organization I worked for, which in the military, was eventually got shifted to NSA. Now, when you think about NSA, it turns out they have 10,000 people working on breaking codes. Well, why do they have so many? What do you need so many people for? Well, first of all, they got to make the code. They got two parts. When you talk about the word cryptology, which is the study of these codes, it's got two parts: the breaking of codes and the making of codes. So you have two groups of people, and you might think about that. If you were the boss of a team, where would you put the team member, the guy coming on, the gal coming on? Would you have them making codes first and then later put them into breaking codes, or would you put them into breaking codes first and later put them into making codes? So these folks, these 10,000 people, they don't have to, they're not breaking codes, and they're not doing Caesar codes or anything like that, but they have to talk about every possible language that is used in the world. So you might ask yourself, how many languages are there in the world? And there are about 600 used languages. And so therefore the NSA has to have people working in those areas. So we'll just take the more common ones. Let's take Russian. You want to break Russian code. So you have to have somebody that has mathematical skill, these kind of skills that we're talking about, and they've got to know Russian. They also have to know Farsi, one of the languages the Indians use. So you can see that that's the case. Now, because the youth, are brought up being familiar with technology and how to use the different technologies in productive ways, they want to recruit people like you. They want to get you because they don't have to teach you the basic stuff. So you notice they have a little pull down here, joining our team. So and these folks, NSA and the other folks that I'm going to look at a little bit, they all have scholarships and grants and things like that to get, and summer assignments to get you to join their team. So if you think that this is something you want to do, remember that there are resources out there that you can get at. They'll help you do that. And it's not just if you ever possibly got a degree in cryptography and network security, which is sort of the more university level language that's used in the area, then you don't only have to go work for NSA, all these very highfalutin organizations. You can go to work for companies, or you can go to work for state government in your state, or city government. Every federal or state organization has to have a security officer, at least one security officer, working in that state. At the University of Nebraska, our security team has about 12 different people working in the security area. And they have to work again as a team. Remember that I told you, that's important. And while we're staying with this site, I'm pointing out, go to the site, review the site. You can put your name on a list where they'll send you new information about whatever's going on. You may not be ready to sign up for the challenge, but you might want to watch the challenge. You might want to watch the problems they put out and the solutions that come up. So we did NSA, and now we want to look at FBI.com. So now we have the feds, and notice what they're doing. They're safeguarding your vote, a joint message of election security. So the people in the FBI have a different challenge than the people at NSA. Sometimes FBI and NSA work together, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they have to keep arm's length away from their work. When you're sending in a vote, they want to make sure that message the vote is protected, and that if you voted in a certain way, that nobody can come in to change it. Now, is there anybody out there that wants to do that? We were talking about who these bad guys are. Well, you never know where the bad guys come from. Again, they could be just irritable people who just want to cause trouble, but they also could be people who are trying to change the vote pattern. You also notice in the bottom right-hand corner that this is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and the museum is very concerned with that, and they have events that talk about national security there. So I talked about NSI, I've talked about there, so now we'll look at CIA. Again, it's the same kind of thing where they have federal labs that help teach you how to break codes and break or make codes. When I've consulted a lot about in this kind of area, and I've gone into companies where the guy says, I've got a code that nobody can break. And if you ever hear anybody say that, you just gotta, that guy or gal is just smoking grass. That's just not true. You're not gonna be able to write a code that nobody can break just by yourself. Maybe if you were a polymath type person who's just a genius, maybe that's possible, but I doubt it. So you see what they're talking about. Now we come to, off on the side here, they talk about spy kids. You would say, well, we're not kids. I don't want to watch that. But I'm telling you, it's worthwhile paying a little attention to these kinds of things. First of all, they're interesting. And second of all, it's how they're presented, how they present different information. So he points out a lot of people think that CIA employees lurk around in trench coats, send coded messages, and use exotic equipment like hidden cameras and so on. So there is a little of that, but only part of the story. The CIA is a U.S. government agency that provides information, what we call intelligence, on foreign countries to the President, the National Security Council, and other U.S. government officials to help them make good decisions about national security issues. So the whole history of how these organizations got formed is another fascinating story. It starts out really way back in 1917, and I'll show you a little of the foils that I used to teach that. But it goes on, and World War II becomes the big breakthrough. And the big breakthrough, it takes place really in Great Britain at a place called Bletchley Park. And there's movies you may have seen about the way they broke codes at Bletchley Park. And the man's name who's associated with all that is Alan Turing. And he's a fascinating character too. And he had just finished his PhD at Princeton and had come back almost to the day when Great Britain was starting to be bombed by the Germans. And Turing brought together another pile of people. And the ad that appeared in the British newspapers looking for linguists and mathematicians and all of that is still available. And that story is a very interesting story also. This is a long period of what I talk about, from the enigma to elliptic curve cryptography. So in this thing, I like to talk about this. I like the study of this because the elements of cryptography, you need to know something about history, you got to know something about philosophy, mathematics, security, so on, privacy. So all of this is important. And it starts in, as I say, back in the First World War. So this guy, Herbert Osborne Yardley, very famous, wrote a book, movies have put out about him. He used his intellect to decode messages coming to President Wilson. So he was not born a cryptography, and this was still early in the area of cryptography, but he broke the code himself. And he tried to convince his superiors that American codes at the time were hopelessly outdated. So that went on. And another person who was very famous was Germany's Arthur Zimmermann. And he was trying to get Mexico to attack America. So he sent messages through Great Britain, it turned out, strangely enough, because he didn't think they could break it, and they broke it. And so this was the message. This is what that numbers, remember I was doing little numbers. Well, the numbers that you see when you do any coding of any sophistication are these kind of numbers. And you notice that there aren't many letters in here. And when you see it today, the language that comes out in code can be any combination of ideas that you might see. And at the end of World War I, there's a fellow by the name of Cherevis. He invents this notion of a machine that can break codes, and it's called the Enigma. So it was invented just after the war in 1918. And the reason he invented was to protect banking and other business transactions. Well, we're getting near the end of my talk, and I might allow some time in case somebody wants to ask questions. And that can be teachers or whoever else wants to challenge some of the things I said or give some new ideas. So I'm listening.
Hey, Don, this is Mark. We had one question in the Q&A that I went ahead and answered. Hopefully I answered correctly. The question was, if you did a Caesar 4, would we just add 4 to each number? And I replied yes to that. I think that's the right answer.
That's right. That's
cool. See, I learned from you.
Sure. Me and Mark are both Air Force veterans and both worked for NSA. Anyway, we remember what I said. Caesar codes. You can have fun with you kids in your class. You can send message to each other about your girlfriends or boyfriends in Caesar code, and your parents won't be able to read that. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. But that's the kind of thing that you can do. And there are even more challenges that you can have. So again, I put down, let me go back now if I can find if you're interested in communicating about coding concepts and my blog, send your information to me. You just send me a little email saying, I want to be on your blog. I want to hear more about what you're doing, that kind of thing. And I'd appreciate your sharing how this brief overview could have been done better. So share some of your observations. Don't be afraid to be critical. I can handle it. I'm an old man. I've been criticized many times. And you got to do it with grace. You got to just sort of accept it that I could have done this better. I could have had a movie version. But at any rate, you see how an old man fights his way through these things. And I thank all the people at the museum, and I'm sure the museum has many things to tell you about that. I love to go to that museum. I love to come in. I've gone there many times, and I belonged to the museum for a number of years. I just hadn't been traveling much, and so I let the membership expire. They can send me another.
We can take care of that, Donald. We can take care of that, Don. We'll get you back in.
Okay.
I have a question from Isaac, Don. He says, how has technology developed since you started, and how has that impacted your work?
That's a great question. So, I mean, I write a lot about my life, and I think about that. So I get into the field of computing when there's punch cards, and that's a very old thing. And you have one language we used was Fortran, and that's the only language you had. And there was no change. I mean, things would remain the same for a year. I mean, there was no real change. I just keep writing programs or hiring people to write programs. There was no change. Then they had something called time sharing. And then they had Fortran and COBOL and RPG and a lot of other languages. So now you had more than one language to deal with. Now, I'm only talking about the computing side of it. I'm not talking about the coding side. I mean, yeah, the coding side. So things, we say that change is happening faster and faster, and that's what happens in everything. And today, nobody in computing can keep up. It's moving so fast. There are so many languages. And that's why those 10,000 people, I bet 2,000 or 3,000 are on them going to get advanced degrees just to keep up. And I'll sort of go back to I first worked for IBM, and we had, nobody knew it. Was on a secret project, and I had a machine. I didn't build a machine or anything, but I was supposed to be testing the machine for doing cryptography. And that's what I did. And that's the right now, I mean, I'm probably not very good at breaking codes, but the breaking of codes, that takes some cleverness. And as I was indicating earlier, my son Ben here, he's worked with me on high performance computing. So in high performance computing, which means having not one CPU, but many CPUs, some of you have machines you're probably going to have to throw away because you only have one CPU. And you can have quad, they call it a quad thing with 4 CPUs or 8 CPUs. And the machine we have at the University of Nebraska can give you 20,000 CPUs working on a problem. So if you're working on a problem with high performance computing, boom, 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 very, very strong codes are broken very, very quickly. Does that sort of cover the question, Mark?
It does. Well, thank you so much, Don. I really appreciate your participating in our chat today, and also your invitation for students to reach out to you to talk about different cyber concepts as well as your blog. Again, I want to thank all of you for participating in our cybersecurity chat today. We hope that you will join us again next Tuesday for another cybersecurity chat. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.